Welcome to Can I Speak to Your Product Manager? The nitty gritty with your favorite PMs. I'm Kyle Kolich, Vice President of Product at Zora.
And I'm Lucas Weber, Director of Product Management at Zora. On today's episode, we have Nathan Creswell, Head of Product at Isometric Technologies, and we're going to start off the show by talking about Nathan's recent Never Have I Ever moment, as well as his best tips and insights for being a successful PM in the ever-evolving business landscape.
Never have I ever.
Never have I ever.
Never have I ever.
All right, Nathan, thanks for joining us today. So each episode, we like to kick things off with a little game of Never Have I Ever. Because as a PM, you probably get pushed to do things outside what you initially thought possible, and no matter what, it magically gets done. So we wanted to bring your experience the outside of your job to the inside of the life of a PM and get to know you a little better at the same time. So Nathan, tell us a little bit about your Never Have I Ever.
Yeah, so I'll preface before I go into my story that there's not much that I haven't done at my age, but there are a couple things that are still new to me. So one thing that happened was that when I moved out of quote to cash product and actually moved into the trucking industry. So I joined a startup called Vector, and that was a trucking technology startup. And so trucking, which I'm sure is new to a lot of your listeners, it was also new to me. And I wanted to learn a totally new domain with new technologies and really get to the roots of product and engineering and build a great product. And they particularly wanted to go from a single product to a multi-product company. And so I didn't know anything about the trucking industry. I knew vaguely that there's a truck that brings stuff to you when you order it on Amazon, and that's as much as I pretty much knew about the trucking industry. So I had to educate myself from the ground up, from the industry executives there, to things online, to various sources online that I could learn the trucking industry from. And it really was a learning experience for me because I was leading different areas of the organization, areas that I had never managed before. So not just product management, but QA, for example. Professional services was another area that I managed. And I learned how to manage people who are experts in something that I am not. And it taught me a lot of very interesting things about leadership and how to lead people that are experts in things that you may not know.
Let's unpack that a little bit. So you started with quote to cash. It sounds like we've been buddies for quite some time, Nathan, because we worked together here at Zora way back when, right? And so you were at that time product manager of our commerce product, particularly the Configure Price Quote CPQ product, and it was all about B2B, mostly SaaS companies, although there were others, but it had nothing to do with hardware, trucks, or anything like this, right? So now you decided to really pivot and try something new. Something that you've never done before in a domain that you've never really experienced. So, and you mentioned that you've looked at various sources of information, et cetera. So, can you give us a little bit, maybe like a taste of maybe the first thing you engaged on, where you really needed to dig in, where you were working with that really brought in this new domain, that need for that knowledge to the fore?
Yeah. Really, you need to prepare, first of all. So Google is your best friend. So Googling the trucking industry, getting into the industry journals, the industry lingo, particularly learning from the people in your company is a first step, because that's the easiest access. That's the easiest thing you can do. That's the fastest thing you can do. Ultimately, though, I believe in learning from customers. Customers are your best teacher. And so being able to visit these carriers, and I visited a lot of carriers. I went out to the Midwest, Green Bay, lovely town, Green Bay, highly recommend it if you have any listeners in Green Bay, and visited these carriers and got to see how their operations are done. And there's so much more that you can learn in person visiting customers than you can on a Zoom call or a video call. They will show you they're happy to show you their daily operations, happy to show you their pains, because they want help. They want help solving their problems. And ultimately, all customers come to software companies with that aim in mind. I have a problem. Can you help me solve it? And that's the key thing, is learning from your customers, being able to synthesize what their problem is and turn that into an effective solution that you can then deploy and solve their problem.
When you made into that kind of pivot, what was something that surprised you?
Yeah, this continues to surprise me as I go in my product management career. We treat technology very seriously. For us, technology is our job, it's our daily life. We think about it. We think about the problems that it can solve. We get excited when a new solution comes out that we think can solve new problems. Normal people don't think that way. Customers don't think that way. For them, technology is just one of 15,000 headaches they have in their day. And can the thing that they buy solve it easily, quickly, fast, without headaches, without problems? They're not interested in going into the depths of the architecture, or that this is a better solution than this, or that that it's incrementally better. They want to know that this thing that I have a problem with, can I solve it easily, quickly, fast, cheaply with what I'm buying from you? If so, sure. Then I'm going to move on to my next fire that I have to fight in my business, which could be totally unrelated to technology. And it amazes me that for us, we agonize over where to place a button, where to put the search bar, how should the search work, how should the columns be ordered, when in reality, they're probably devoting 3 seconds of thought in their day. Can I find the button? No? Okay, I can't find the button. This is terrible software. I'm going to give up. I'm going to move on to my next issue. So that even should make us think more about these things, because it has to be so innate that it's so obvious of how to use the software, how to solve the problem with the software, that it should be as obvious as possible.
I'm assuming here that your solution at Vector was actually software that was this within the truck itself, or within the carriers? Oh, within the truck, right?
Yeah, it was an app on the carrier's mobile phones, on the truck drivers' mobile phones. And so we thought a lot even though the carrier may not necessarily be the ultimate, or the truck driver is not the ultimate purchaser, there's always that buyer-user distinction in B2B software. Mm-hmm. We thought a lot about user experience, because this truck driver, if they weren't able to use the app, if they couldn't easily find it, they would just not use it. They would not use it to upload their documents, their bill of ladings, their proof of deliveries. They would just say, this is a useless app and we're not going to adopt it. So we actually had to think very, very much about the user experience, particularly on a mobile device, where you can imagine and think about the environment of a truck, of a cab. It's noisy, it's dirty, it's smelly, right? I'm sure there's some clean truck cabs out there, but there's papers everywhere, there's empty fast food containers, right? And you want to do something quickly, and you don't want to do. The difference between 2 and 3 clicks is very important. The difference between 1 and 2 clicks is very important. So how can you minimize that to have the least amount of user friction possible to achieve the job to be done?
Yeah, that I would think you're right. The margin of error within like an app type of product, and that your user's experience is completely different, right? And you're right. If they find any kind of friction behind it, that app is gone. And and what I've noticed too is also hard to win them back. Like once you kind of get down that path, and something with our software, we tend to like try things out and test it, and you see how things are going. But with something like this, if the trucker doesn't like it at first, it's so hard to get them back to wanting to use it.
Absolutely.
Getting their friends wanting to use it, and then they kind of gang up on it, like, oh, we're not using it. And you're like, oh no, how to get back from that?
Yeah, and to even convince them to download the app was a friction. If you think about ourselves, we have so many apps on our phones today. Mm-hmm. Okay, if I'm going to download an app, I need a good reason to add my 51st app to my 50 apps on my phone. So to even convince them to download the app was a challenge, and how to onboard them, make the onboarding, everything had to be seamless and easy. Otherwise, they won't use it. And you're right, you wouldn't get them back. And they'd tell all their friends, by the way, this app is terrible. So we put a lot of thought into making onboarding easy, all of that easy for the form factor, even using data, because a lot of these truck drivers had per megabyte data plans, or per gigabyte data plans. So they'd be really offended if they had to download a 300 megabyte app. So we had to get it down to the minimum, make sure transmission rates were at the minimum. There was a lot of thinking that, as opposed to a traditional desktop software product that you had to go and think about.
I'm guessing obviously there was a steep learning curve. So just maybe give us a quick summary. So how did it all work out for you?
I mean, mainly because so it was more than just one product. It was a set of products, and not to bore your listeners too much, but it was actually from my quote to cash days, I coined a term, delivery to cash, proving that all things are just reinventions of things in the past. So delivery to cash was the term I coined for it. So the ability to take a picture of a document, of a bill of lading document, and then funnel it through a billing application. So ultimately that document has to go in with the invoice to be sent to the ultimate payer of that invoice, which is usually the shipper. So all of that had to work seamlessly from mobile app to back office software. On top of that, we were not the system of record. So we had to do integration to the system of record to get the core records that are related to that invoice and that document to be able to send it out. So it was a lot of technical work, actually, but it worked pretty seamlessly from end to end, from truck driver experience to back office billing person sending out the invoice. And it's something that I'm still quite proud of to this day because it was multiple products working from end to end.
So were there things that you were looking for, a particular outcome that you achieved or even maybe surpassed?
Yeah, absolutely. My personal motto is we need to ship product and make customers happy. And so how do you measure each of those things? Shipping product and making customers happy. Shipping product is by and large the day-to-day, wrestling things through engineering, testing software, working on UX, making sure it's good, and meeting a date, ideally, if you can, to actually ship the software. Making customers happy, by and large, in B2B software, a fundamental component of that is usage. If you're using it, you are hopefully happy. Not always true. Not always true. But if you're using it, you are getting utility out of it. You are finishing the job to be done. You have solved your problem. Now, having said that, there can be unhappiness still wrapped up in that. And a typical way to measure it in B2B software is how many records are in a table. That's a very simple, low-cost way to say, is this being used? Are you entering data into the system? Is it flowing through the system? Then you can get into a higher order of metrics management around the actual user journey, which is where you're starting to get more into B2C land as opposed to B2B. So what is the funnel that the user went through to actually achieve that job to be done? Where did they fall off? Did they fall off because they couldn't find the button? Or maybe that was a training issue. They weren't trained to find that button. And if they were pointed out where it is, they'd be fine. So there's orders of magnitude in terms of how far you go into track, and that's going to be a function of the cost of tracking. There is a cost to implementing all that tracking, whether through engineering or through time or through what micro level you go to. So we were definitely keen on tracking these kinds of metrics. How many invoices were sent out from our system? How many documents were sent out from our system? How many documents were uploaded into our system? But additionally, we would also measure customer happiness. So NPS scores, for example, there's various ways you can do it now, not necessarily we did at Vector, but Hotjar, for example, you can run user surveys and all of this, and you can pop up and say how happy are. We've all experienced them in apps as well, because that is important. You want to know, firstly, is the job being completed? Is the job to be done achieved? Then secondly, well, how happy were you with the experience? That is a component these days. You can't, particularly in the example at Vector, you couldn't ignore the user because the user was so fundamental in kicking off the process. And by and large, truck drivers they're very autonomous. They can do, they're out there on the road. They can, they have a lot of variability in terms of what they're allowed to do. So it was very important to understand the user journey, but also understand that the actual business process was completed.
So NPS was one of the things you used for happiness. That's Net Promoter Score. And then was there a higher level metric that you were trying to optimize?
Yeah, it was primarily time. So that's a customer success driven metric more so than a product analytics metric is how I would term that. And we'd use that in sales presentations. So we'd be able to say, on average, you'll cut your time to invoice from 3 weeks to 2 days. So carrier businesses also, the business context here is very important. Carrier businesses are very much cash flow businesses. They are asset intensive cash flow businesses. And so the ability to send out from the point that you deliver the shipment and a proof that you have delivered the shipment to the point that you send out the invoice, getting that down to days, if not hours, is actually very important, because once it's received by the shipper, they will put their own terms on it, and they'll want to lengthen those terms out as much as they can. We'll pay you in 180 days, 90 days, 60 days. So any way that you can shorten that time to get the new cash into the business that you can then redeploy is very, very important in a carrier, particularly a mid-market carrier, which is the trucking businesses we were going after.
I think that the jobs to be done and how happy the customers is a pretty good kind of viewpoint for that. And one of the things of jobs to be done for a PM is innovation, and so it kind of leads us to that second segment we have. Innovation, therapy, and other wild tales. And we're kind of into the nitty-gritty of it, but let's go a little bit more deeper on what's happening with the PM. So, I guess, what are some of the things at top of mind for you, Nathan, as a PM, and what do you think is next for innovation, and what are you kind of excited about?
Yeah, so I will talk about AI later, but for this particular question, I'm thinking a lot about innovation in the trucking industry, in particular, supply chain and trucking, and particularly how fragmented the industry is. The industry, by its very nature, is an industry of fragmentation. You see it in almost if you were to Google trucking, it will talk about how much of a long tail there is in the trucking industry. It is something crazy statistic, something like 80% of all freight is companies with 400 trucks or less, something like that. There's a few very large players, and then there's a huge long tail of trucking companies. And so that has repercussions throughout the go-to-market of any software product in the industry, because all these players, and there's typically three players, there's retailers, there's shippers, and there's carriers. So retailers, Walmart, so on and so forth, shippers, Clorox, people like that, manufacturers, and then carriers, trucking carriers. And there's all sorts of variations in between, but those are the three large personas that you're dealing with. And each one of these players is fragmented. They have their own systems, they have their own ways of doing things, they have their own ways of measuring things, but ironically, it's fundamentally a networked industry. It is fundamentally a network. A shipper will call on a carrier to deliver something to a retailer. So there has to be cooperation and collaboration. It's forced by the nature of the business. And so how do you do that when everything is so fragmented? When it could be one carrier today and a different carrier tomorrow? When it could be one type of good versus another type of good tomorrow? So I think a lot about that. And so the vision of ISO, trying to bring that all together, what if you play what if a lot as a product manager? What if you could have everyone under the same umbrella, everyone under the same system as a network system? This is the dream of supply chain. And so if you could get everyone speaking the same language, speaking the same KPIs, speaking the same metrics, what would be the efficiencies that you could unlock, the automation that you could unlock, the drudgery that people do day to day that really is just a function of inefficient systems? And not really a business problem. It's just a siloed problem. That's a lot of what I'm thinking about today, because that is where we ultimately would like to go, and having everyone under the same umbrella speaking the same language, using hopefully the same software. And the challenge of doing that is that everyone will still have their own requests. They'll say, but we want to do it this way. We want to do it that way. So how do you handle that while still having a standardized system? I think the days of going to market with SAP or any of these, or Oracle, or saying this is the way we do it, is somewhat not out of favor is the word I want to use, but it's by the wayside. You have to find a way with new technologies and new ways of approaching things to handle customization, but also provide standardization so that everyone can speak the same language. And that's the innovation challenge, I think, that is a fundamental B2B innovation challenge as we move forward.
And that's where you see a lot of like those disruptors coming up, right? So they're kind of wedging themselves in between, or like away from Oracle, SAP, showing that there's another way of doing it, creating that standardization. Or what are you kind of seeing in the market of how they're playing against that kind of the bigger players then?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen is that customization these days is, provided it's thought about from the ground up in terms of technical architecture, is not hard. What is hard is to put customization on top of a system that was never designed for it. But if you can think about it from the ground up, and I won't get too much into the technical details. So for example, JSON. Everything can be represented in a JSON object now, right? And so being able to, you look in a database these days and it's not individual columns, it's a blob of JSON that is then parsed in the application layer. And so, it doesn't mean that to add a field, you have to add a column to a table anymore. That blew my mind as being an old Siebel SAP guy. That's what we used to do. You want a new column, you add a new column to a table. And that has repercussions throughout the application stack. So very, very interesting how customization can now be the first order of concern. Like, how are we going to customize? What are we going to customize? What should we allow to customize? What would a customer allow us to customize? What would they not allow us to customize? That's very interesting thinking, and then how that develops and finds its way into the product is a very, very innovation, as I would say, in B2B software these days.
So I'm going to ask a question that maybe is, just going to show you my expertise into the supply chain and trucking industry. Trucks, I pass them on the freeway all the time. They all look pretty similar. The goods seem pretty reasonable. This has been going on for decades, doing this sort of stuff. So how come there are no standards? What is driving the customization? Why isn't this just simply, look, I've got a truck that needs to go from point A to point B, and yes, various companies might be able to do that, right? But ultimately, not to offend anyone, are they not interchangeable because they effectively fulfill the same functional role? What's kind of driving that customization?
There are standards. Don't get me wrong. If you Google trucking standards, there are attempts to say this is the standard, and I'll give you an example of a standard that, in my opinion, somewhat failed. EDI. EDI is used heavily in the trucking industry. If your listeners know that term, electronic document interchange, I think it stands for, or interface. And so this was the first way to do point-to-point integrations. So there are EDI formats out there. They'll refer to them in the trucking industry by their number designation. So a purchase order is something like 200 and something else. And so all these systems communicate through EDI to this day. They use EDI. Now, EDI is supposed to be a standard. It's supposed to be, these are the 5 fields you have on the purchase order header. These are the 15 fields you have on the items. In reality, because it's on-premise configuration, everyone added their own flavor to it. So there's an extra field here. There's an extra, this field was dropped and another field was put in place. And so every EDI has, it's by and large the same, but it's entirely customized. So that's aside from the fact that a lot of EDI transmissions actually fail because it's so antiquated and on-premise and point-to-point. So you actually have a situation of where the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak in terms of standards. It's a great idea, but the industry is so fragmented. There's so many different decision makers, particularly in the American trucking industry. I think I don't have personal experience with the European trucking industry, but my impression is that it's a little bit more standardized over there. But particularly in the American trucking industry, it's very, very hard to introduce a standard. And there's all sorts of consortiums and advisory boards and things like this to advise on standards. But the actual implementation of it, you get back to, well, but our business works this way, and our business works this way, and oil and gas needs this, and food delivery needs this. As an example, when you do food deliveries, particularly milk or liquids, there's a 3-truck wash rule. You have to wash the truck, I believe. It's been a while since I looked at it, but you have to wash it 3 times, something like that, to be sure that you've got all the contaminants out. So you need something that supports that. That causes a whole host of repercussions. Everything is different. And so how do you handle that in a standardized system? You can't. You got to customize it, either to that industry or to that customer.
Is there kind of a rivalry or even different standards between, train freight on truckers, airline freight? Is that a thing, or is it they're all like, if they all walked into a bar, would there be a fight, or do they all kind of get along?
I think they by and large all get along. I've never seen personally a fight between truckers.
Okay. All right.
But I think that they, by and large, all get along. I mean, to be honest with you, the only body that can really introduce a standard is the government. And they did that with trucking hours, electronic tracking of how many hours a trucker is allowed to drive, and that caused a whole host of startups to start when that was introduced, because suddenly you needed an electronic way to track when a truck driver goes off shift or on shift. So that was an example of a standard that was implemented, but that was law. That you either did it or you got in trouble.
Yeah, because it was safety. Yeah, so that's usually where this kicks in, right? Because if a trucker's on the road for too long, they may be fatigued, they may not be paying attention, and they're driving a very big thing, going fast, right? And it can cause a lot of issues. So that makes sense. So that's safety. I mean, you get something very similar in the airline industry, right? Commercial, where pilots can only be for so long. I think we've all experienced that when we fly, where, exactly, right? The crew time's out. So something similar. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
But Lucas, when that happens, can't you just step in and take care of it?
Yeah, absolutely. As a private pilot over here, I have everything I need to fly a multi-engine airplane with hundreds of people on board. Absolutely, not a concern.
Same thing, just
yeah,
bigger.
that doesn't happen, by the way. Yeah, that's a myth right there. That doesn't work that way. But the other thing that I think made a point to why this is, so you say siloed, but it's that long tail. It's the fact that you have a lot of companies involved in this. Some of them that are probably fairly small, and so their budget for doing, IT innovation projects is probably limited. Their interest isn't. This, I think this is, Kyle was saying that there may be a little bit of competition between the different ways and means, but of pushing freight around, right? But to be honest, I would also imagine that there are established relationships in localities, right? Like if these are smaller companies and, they only do this route, they only work between this shipper and this retailer. And so they have established relationships, established processes. And now you're coming in with a stand and they're like, look, our customization actually works. So we don't need the standard, right? Because it's always worked and we feel it well. So is that a right way to start thinking about it?
Yeah, that's one of the aspects of the industry. It is very much a relationship-based industry, and for the exact reasons that you specify, you get to know a particular carrier, and they might only have 10 trucks, but they're great. They give you great service, they give you great rates, and so you use them. And so why do you need a standard between friends? They do great business with you. They can deliver on time. They pick up on time, and they're cheap compared to other carriers. So why ruin a good thing? Why change it? So to enforce change on something that's working, even if it's inefficient, even if there could be a better way of doing things, will not fly because things are great.
Very interesting story about truckers. I've learned a lot more than I thought I would. I don't know. I feel like maybe we could shift gears and get into our next segment, which is PM Power Moves.
Powering up.
Power moves.
So we'll shift gears metaphorically and maybe even in the trucking industry, literally. But really want to get into kind of a specific instance where things really required all of your skill as a PM. Is there maybe a story you could walk us through where, things you took out all the tools that you have in your PM toolkit and got to it and got things done? Is there anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah. So at Vector in particular, and I already mentioned we did a billing application there. We really put into focus hypercare for the first few customers when we launched that product line. And that's very, very important in B2B SaaS. Your first 5 customers, you have to ensure that they are singing your praises. Because if you can't make your first 5 customers happy, you're not going to make the next 10 customers happy. So we went into super hypercare mode for the first 5 customers. So I visited this customer, I went out on site, I did the training in the product for them. I made sure that they knew precisely how to use this product and that it was going to have value for them. And so we received an email from one of the billing analysts saying, you know what, now billing is fun. And I have never, and you both have a background in billing, I don't think I've heard anyone ever say billing is fun. So
I heard another F word. It's normally another F word, not fun.
So the fact that we could actually make someone's life enjoyable in billing was a huge, huge win. And actually, because ultimately, yes, we get paid for the software. Yes, if they renew, we're all happy as software. But at a fundamental level, I'd like to know that I'm making people's lives better. I don't want to know that I'm making people's lives worse through software. If that's what I'm doing with my life, then maybe I should re-examine my life. Ideally, when I'm deploying the software, your life from the moment that we deploy it has turned into a good thing. So that is a good thing, and that's a good feeling to walk away with as a PM, that you've, after all the hard work, you've made actually someone's life better.
Yeah, that's what we call the mission moment, right? Where you've actually achieved your mission of making a world a better place in some particular domain. So you went out and actually trained all the, was this the same kind of item that we talked about, where it's an app on the phone or something like that you were training the operators on, or something else? And,
it was the back office functions. So we did show them,
okay.
Yeah, so we showed them the truck driver, the actual truck driver experience was so simple, it didn't need training. It was literally two clicks to upload a document. So there was very, very little training needed there. But as we all know, back office processes are a bit more involved. So I had to take the 3 or 4 billing analysts through how you actually send out the invoice, double check it before it's sent out, make sure that track it after it's sent, make sure that you know that it was read and followed up on. So it was all of that we had to take them through training.
Got it. So change management. So I can only imagine that the process they had previous to your software must have been perhaps not fun, right? Is that true?
Oh yeah, it was horrendous. Mainly because if you don't have a digital image of the document that easily matches up to the invoice, then you spend a lot of manual work trying to correlate which document goes with which invoice. So they were doing all that manually. Like, I kid you not, that some of these customers had a tray where the truck driver would come in at the end of the day, handing in all their documentation. Then someone in the back office would have to go and scan that documentation to turn it into a digital document, to then email out. By the way, some of their customers didn't accept digital invoices or PDFs, so they had to print it out again to stuff it into an envelope to get mailed out. So it was a lot of manual work.
Now, I think one thing I like what you said was that you get those top, those 5 customers really using it, being happy. But from those 5 customers, you're probably going to get a lot of defects, bugs, issues. I guess, what are some of the things you've done, kind of a creative strategy to kind of mitigate that and speed up and get those 5 customers as happy as possible?
Yeah, so there's a range of strategies. I mean, that's hypercare mode. So it's being fed, and this is why at least the most recent 2 companies having at a certain size professional services reporting into product is a great idea, because that feedback loop is so quick. Once you go into implementation, the bugs, the features, the suggestions, there can be rapid feedback from the customer to the product team. Because no matter how much you plan and how much you design, no plan survives the first battle. No plan survives the first implementation. You will discover things that you never knew, or no one thought to tell you, or the customer didn't tell you. Oh, and by the way, here was something that we were told about in the sales cycle that's not in your product. Where's that? So you need to be hyper vigilant in these first few customers and managing that implementation. Maybe not directly, but at least attending meetings, getting feedback, having some method to get that rapid feedback back into the product. Hopefully you've done enough QA and you've done enough testing that the number of bugs, that it's working as designed. So if you know how it should work, that should all be fine, and that should be handled by your QA processes. But it's the things that you don't know that are the things that jump out at you. Oh, you didn't know that actually, by the way, they're switching between 2 screens as they're using your product. And so they need a way to copy and paste easily from the second screen to the first screen. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, we'll loop that into the roadmap. It's those things that really worry me at any product launch. It's the things that you don't know and you can't test for until you actually implement. And by the way, customers are most motivated to give feedback when they're in implementation. When they haven't bought the product, when they are just a prospect, they're not going to give you feedback to any level of interest. It's when they're using it and they're like, this is my day-to-day, so I better take an interest in this. That's when they're most motivated to give you feedback. As I said before, they got 15,000 fires. Giving feedback on your product is the lowest of low priorities on their list. So getting them at the right time, meeting them when they're motivated is so important, so super important.
I think this leads into our fourth segment, which allows you to know what problem to do and what problem to focus on. As you said, PMs should spend a lot of time thinking about this. We're not going to give you that much time. It's going to be a little bit quicker. We're going to throw a couple: ship it or skip it.
What do you want to do?
Let's do it.
No.
No. Maybe. Yes.
So, because of the trucking industry, a lot of changes. What's your thoughts on the electronic semi-trailer trucks? Full electronic.
Electric trucks, ship it. Ship it. Good for the environment, good for the economy. Only problem is you have to solve the charging problem first. It takes too long to charge. These are assets. You want them on the road earning. So until you solve that, that's not going to be a go. But the concept, everyone's moving electric. It's good for the country, good for companies, good for climate. Ship it.
Okay, good. And then last time we spoke, I think you were flying somewhere, and you were in a plane, and so you kind of that experience is fresh in your head. Would you sit in a double-decker seats? I know they were kind of a new concept where the seats are kind of double-decker in the plane. Would you ship it or skip it?
Skip it. Users would not be happy. I don't want someone's feet dangling in front of my face.
I figured there's a little bit of that problem, other problems too, that can, especially where the head and the body lines. But good. All right. I also saw this in Germany, which I thought was interesting. But it's a water park with giant slides, but the users are wearing a VR virtual reality headset, and they can kind of go through the experience of whatever they want. But you don't. The water ride has them view these VR lenses
while they're on the water slide.
Water slide.
They got VR lenses.
They do.
Oh, interesting. Let me think about that one. I would say, provided safety concerns could be considered, ship it.
Or wow. Okay.
Ship it. Because that would be pretty cool. You'd be going and you could see different things. You could digitally create. You could show them ads while they're on the water slide. Monetize it.
I bet they like that. I bet
they'd love that. Like fearing for my life, and I see an ad for life insurance. That would be great.
I think only 3 kids were electrocuted, so I think they were
exactly
threshold for numbers.
So far, Kyle.
Yeah, they got the charges. So they don't get the charge right, but it's getting there.
Ship it, provided you can solve the safety concerns.
If we can solve the safety concern, we'll put it down as a ship it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, I want to throw one in. So now that you've been working in trucking, do you want to go drive a truck, like get licensed and drive a truck?
Absolutely. There's a game out there on Steam, if everyone knows that I highly recommend, called American Truck Simulator. And the point of this game is to, as realistically as possible, simulate driving a truck. It is one of the most interesting experiences that I highly recommend to your listeners to try out themselves. It is as close to reality as you will get without actually driving a truck. And some real fanatics, they get the steering wheel set up, they get the pedals set up, and they will, for relaxation, drive a truck 2 hours a night, virtually. So I highly recommend that experience.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And hopefully your app from your company is in the simulator, so we can actually also gain the efficiencies of scanning
the billing efficiencies from making a delivery. It's fantastic. You can see what trucking company owners and drivers go through this experience. So.
Awesome. I guess maybe let me sneak one more in, because I think when we asked about the electric truck, right, you kind of jumped into autonomy. And we did promise to talk a little bit about AI. And so I'd love to just circle back to that. So your thoughts based on, working with carriers and obviously truck drivers, et cetera. What is your thought about autonomous cars, electric or otherwise, doesn't matter, but just the autonomy?
I mean, I will do a plug for ISO and Isometric Technologies. We are thinking a lot about AI for our data and actually applying AI to our data. We're actually beta testing an internal feature related to that, so that we can actually get insights from our data, because we're fundamentally a data company. So I just wanted to do a quick plug for that. So it is definitely a concern that's top of my mind, and I'm trying to keep the pace of innovation in AI is just nuts at the moment. So every day a new model comes out and things like this. For autonomous trucking, that's a whole different concern, because you are on a road with a 20-ton, 30-ton, however many tons big trailer. Safety is a far greater concern with something like that versus a passenger car. So the regulations around that, making sure. And by the way, freeway driving is largely okay. They've proven that driving in a straight line is possible, with a truck. But when you get to the cities, when you get to there's problems there, because then there's pedestrians, there's weird markings, there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. If you ever try and back up a trailer, it's really difficult to back up a trailer going in reverse. So you have to actually account for all of these scenarios at the origin and destination. So that, I think, needs a lot more work. But by and large, and there's companies that have been set up to do this, autonomous trucks just from point to point outside of the actual original destination. And then they hand off to humans at actually those destinations. So I think autonomous trucks are coming. And I went up to San Francisco the other day. I saw an autonomous car, very unnerving, no driver, just people in the back seat. I wanted to open the door and start driving the car. So it's coming. It will come. As to when it will come is the debate. Will it be 5 years, 10 years? They have to make sure it's safe. They have to make sure that all the things that can go wrong with such a massive vehicle are accounted for, and that people are kept safe. So I think, we're going to see it after autonomous cars for that reason. As to how much, your guess is as good as mine. 5 years, 10 years, next year, who knows? Absolutely.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, Nathan, I think that's all I've got. Kyle, any additional items from you?
No, this is great, Nate. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
I hope your listeners learned a bit more about trucking. And just remember, if you bought it, a truck brought it. So
that's true. That's a good point.
that is a good point. Excellent. Nathan, thank you again for joining us. A real pleasure chatting with you and learning more about trucks, and look forward to keeping up with you in the future. Maybe see how that beta AI product from ISO is doing, and whether we have autonomous trucks on the roads by the time we talk next. Hopefully it won't be that long.
Hopefully it won't be that long. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think that was a great conversation, Lucas. I think we learned a lot about the trucking industry, stuff I probably didn't even know about, how in-depth it was. I like his comments about shipping products that make customers happy. I think that's a good kind of, North Star to think through. Because I think that was a big theme of what he was saying. I want to make sure the products I'm creating brings happiness to the end user, and doesn't cause pain. I think that one, billing is fun comment was key, right? Because you want to make sure everything you're doing is really driving towards that. And I like the idea what he was having with that hypercare. I think we live with this too, but making sure your first 5 customers are super happy, and making sure you go all in on that. And then I liked how he thought about how do we triage some of those issues that come up, and what are some of the strategies he does to ensure that those 5 customers are super happy and become referenceable customers. Someone can keep singing your praises, which is a key point. Well, yeah. So Lucas, what'd you think? What was some of your thoughts?
Yeah, it's great chatting with Nathan. It's great to catch up with him, albeit on a podcast after so many years. But interesting that he switched to a brand new domain. One of the things we're hearing constantly, right, is that PMs need to be ready to just jump into a brand new thing that they just may not be even experts on. And Nathan certainly did that, right, and jumped into a completely new domain in trucking, and then leveraged everything he could, right? Whether that's online resources, the folks he worked with, the customers, et cetera, to just ramp up very, very quickly, and then leverage those experts to really advise him on how to put the product together and launch it successfully, and then accomplish exactly what you said, right? Accomplish the jobs to be done framework, and make sure that the users are happy, and the focus is on making sure it's usable. So I think that's a big takeaway, is just being open-minded. We tried to ask him if he had any preconceptions or surprises, right? And he's like, well, I didn't know anything about this, so I came in completely open-minded, right, looked at certain things, right, and was able then to make things a success. So I thought that was a takeaway that we're hearing consistently. Obviously, billing is fun. Very much a big fan of that. To hear that come out. I think those are key things, and it sounds like I might need to go on Steam and take a look at that.
Yeah, that'd be
American,
cool.
Truck Simulator, see what that's all about.
Yeah.
So those were really my takeaway. Really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, and I think the next time we do a podcast, we do it with him, but we do the back of a truck that's self-driving. So we really test the safety with the studio in the back.
Given Nathan's propensity to jump in and save those poor souls in the autonomous taxi, I have a sneaking suspicion that
maybe we won't be able to do that.
He might be actually doing the driving while we discuss. But regardless how it is, that would be a lot of fun to do that in a truck. Well, thank you all for joining us. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and join us on the next episode of Can I Speak to Your Product Manager?